While others can find forests unsettling in the dark, I've always found that there is something uniquely tranquil about walking through a forest at night. There would be no one but me and the sound of the wind through the trees, the rustling of small animals through the leaf litter, and the sound of the forest floor crunching beneath my boots. I had decided to take a walk through the woods of my hometown. I always did this when life got too much, and today I needed to clear my head. Peace and quiet, I said to myself as I began the hour or so walk I had taken countless times before. The walk ended at a beautiful lake that I used to play around in when I was a child. That's where I had to be, where I needed to be. The lake always had a way of making me feel great nostalgia for a past life I wished I could back to, a life I would never forget. The moonlight lit most of my trail, and for a while I had no need for my torch. The forest made its familiar sounds. What I wasn't expecting was a low grumble of thunder in the distance. Oh no, please don't rain. I wasn't dressed properly for a storm, but nothing was going to stop me from my destination. I continued. I knew the woods like the back of my hand. Every tree, every rock was like a navigation tool for me. The lake wasn't far, maybe half an hour or so away, and that's when I heard something that caught me off guard. A laugh. I'm sure it was. It was faint and clearly off in the distance. It was a woman's laugh, not a maniacal laugh, but a playful giggle. This was enough to make me feel somewhat uneasy. However, I told myself that it must have just been a sound of the forest or some sort of animal, and I continued on. I made it to the lake and found a place to sit. The moonlight bounced of the water, illumining the whole lake. I grabbed a stick and moved it through the lake, listening to the sound of the water gently ripple. I sat there for a long time and had completely forgotten about the giggle I heard earlier. I didn't want to leave, but the hour was growing late, and I thought it was about time I get back, so I stood myself up and I gasped. Across the lake there was a woman. She caught me by surprise. Why was she out here this late? I noticed that, strangely, she was naked. She wasn't horrifying, but beautiful, however. It was a cold night, so my immediate thought was that she was in danger. "Hello! Are you all right?" She didn't respond, just stood there looking at me and smiling. There was a low rumble of thunder again, and the approaching clouds started to cover the moon. I couldn't see her anymore. All I heard was a quiet giggle echo across the lake. All the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I didn't know why. I wanted to go around the lake and try to help her, but something was telling me that I needed to leave now. I turned around and started to go back the way I came, but every step I took, I heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps behind me. I felt eyes on me like daggers on the back of my head. I didn't turn around. I was scared. Was it her? What did she want? I didn't turn around. I carried on walking until I heard a whisper from behind me. "Turn around." I jumped out of my skin and quickly turned around to find her behind me, standing with her arms straight down by her side like a soldier standing to attention. I turned on my torch and pointed it at her. There was something not right. Her teeth were black and her eyes, they had no iris, just two white eyes with a pair of tiny pupils. Her grin stretched across her face, and as she smiled, and black liquid seeped from the corner of her mouth. "Don't forget," she said, followed by yet another playful giggle. With this, she slinked back slowly into the forest and disappeared behind a tree. I didn't follow. I turned around and walked as quickly as I could. I knew that if I ran, I would lose my way, and it was beginning to rain. It was so dark now that all I could see was what my torch was illuminating. I finally came to a clearing where the path diverged into two. I recognized the tree that stood between the two paths. I had seen it countless times before. No, is it left or right? Shit! How could I not remember? I've walked this trail 100 times. It was like muscle memory to me. Okay, think. It's left. It's gotta be left. I walked quickly down the trail to the left, and almost as soon as I did, I heard that fucking laughter again, but this time it was loud and hysterical. I shone my torch through the trees. The laughter sounded like it was coming from all around me until it stopped abruptly. I turned my attention back to the path, and there she stood. She wasn't smiling anymore, just staring at me. Her appearance seemed to have changed once again. Her arms had become unnaturally long, almost touching the floor, and her skin was deathly pale and gray. She took one step forward towards me, and I took one step back. She whispered, "Don't forget." The smile reappeared on her face, and the black liquid poured out of her mouth again, this time like a river of blood flowing down her neck and chest. I was frozen in fear, watching her as she bent down onto all fours and crept slowly around me, disappearing once again. It took me a while to snap back into reality. I scanned the forest in front of me. I couldn't remember anything. The path ahead, the trees, everything looked alien to me. All I could do was follow the path ahead of me and hope to God that it leads me out of the woods. The forest was quiet now. The rain had stopped, no wind, no rustling of leaf litter, no crickets, no birds. Nothing. I tried to remember how long I had been on this path, but I seemingly had no memory of anything besides the woman. I didn't even remember how I got to the forest or why. I stopped in the middle of the path, desperately looking around for anything that would jog my memory. All the while, the deafening silence continued. Not a damn thing could remind me where I was or how to escape. As my eyes glanced around, they fixed to something irregular. There seemed to something calved on a tree. I slowly walked forward and realized they were words. When I got close enough, I could read those words. "Don't look at it. Don't listen to it." My torch started to flicker. "No, no, 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 please no!" I hit it against my palm until mercifully it sprung back into life, and then the forest wasn't quiet anymore. I could hear breathing, heavy, labored breathing, almost like someone having an asthma attack. I shone my torch toward the noise and saw a hand clutching the side of a tree. I couldn't see the body, just the hand, but it was so far up the tree that this thing must have been at least 8 feet tall. The breathing didn't stop, and my torch began to flicker again as whatever this thing was began to move. It tilted its head slowly around the tree to look at me. 2 huge white eyes gazed into my very soul. I wanted to close my eyes and press my hands over my ears, but I was frozen again. "Look at me," it said. It then took a slow, giant step out from behind the tree to reveal itself to me. The smile had returned to its face, and it never looked more unnatural than it did at that moment. It was huge. It was even taller than I thought, almost as big as the trees it moved through. Its arms were long and bony, and its spine was twisted and contorted. It struggled as it moved slowly towards me, as if its body was being controlled like a puppet. It then stopped in front of me and slowly bent down to walk on all fours, its body clicking and snapping as it did. "Listen," it said. It was inhaling its words as it spoke, as if it was gasping for air. Its smile stretched further across its emaciated gray face, and its cold white eyes didn't blink. As if nothing could get any worse at that point, my torch gave in and died. I was in complete darkness. I couldn't see a thing. I could hear it getting closer as my legs began to tremble and give way. I fell to my knees. The air smelt more and more like decaying flesh the closer it got to me, and the sound of breaking bones as it moved itself across the floor was getting louder and louder until I could feel its breath on my face. I closed my eyes as tears started to roll down my cheeks. I braced myself for the end, and then I felt a cold hand brush my cheek, wiping away the tears from my face. "Goodbye," it said, and all the sounds were gone once again. That was the last I saw of it. I'm still here. I don't remember my name. I don't know this place. Why am I here? How to get out? I don't remember. All a skeptic is someone who hasn't had an experience yet. Jason Hawes. Monsters are real, and ghosts are real too. They live inside us, and sometimes they win. Stephen King. Clinking and clanging filled the room, coming from finished plates and drinking glasses. As supper was ending, friends and family of the Marvins were ready to leave and give thanks for the fantastic meal they received. They stuffed their bellies with garlic butter glazed ribeye, soft and perfectly seasoned potatoes, and steamed carrots that were cooked with the leftover steak glaze. They had the option to drink either a smooth-aged savory red wine from 1953 or a nice cold Arnold Palmer for the non-alcohol drinkers. The Marvins enjoyed the company, but it was getting pretty late. It would be nice to get rest after a long preparation. As guests were leaving, the mood began to die out, the mood of trying to be a great host and hostess. Relieved of not having to impress anyone anymore, the Marvins get ready to hit the hay. They cleaned the kitchen, washed the dishes, and made sure all leftover food was put away. As they turned off all the unnecessary electricity, they remembered that they still had one more stressful task. They had to put Elliot to bed. He put up a fuss every night, and the Marvins were tired and annoyed. "We're not putting up with this today." Every night was a mystery as to why Elliot wouldn't sleep in his room. He would always go to his parents' bed and ask to sleep with them, but after they put on a good presentation, they wanted to give each other a reward. And some little bastard of a son isn't going to mess up the only night they can be intimate with one another. "Elliot, you are sleeping in your own bed tonight," Mrs. Marvin said. "Wait, no, Mom, please. I promise this is the last night. I swear." "What I say about swearing, boy?" asked Mr. Marvin. "That it's a sin, sir." "So does it make it right to swear in the same sentence that mentions your mother?" "No, sir." "What did your mother tell you?" "That I have to sleep in my own room," Elliot replied. "So are you going to disobey your mother's command?" "Never that, sir," Elliot answered hopelessly, dreading of what's to come if he lay in his own bedroom. They didn't understand. Elliot didn't either. What he saw is merely unexplainable. There's no answer or solution. How can he tell his parents what lies in his room? "Can I have the light on tonight at least?" "No way in hell. The light's going to keep you up, and I'll be a fool to let you raise my power bill," replied Mr. Marvin. "Sweetheart, I will get you a nightlight tomorrow." "Can you be a big boy just for tonight?" asked Ms. Marvin. "Don't baby him. He needs to be a man and face his fears head on." "Louis, that's why he doesn't stay in his room. It's the dark. Everyone was scared of the dark as a child. Hell, my grandfather was scared of the dark till he was 83. "Steph, your grandfather fought in Nam. Goddamn Vietnam, I'll be scared of my own farts if I was him. Remember on New Year's he stabbed your Uncle Lenny." "Louis, I'm not saying let him sleep in our room, just we'll get him a light for his room tomorrow." "No way, I'm not raising a girl. Either he puts up with it or I'm letting the dog take his bed and making Elliot sleep in the back. Rover doesn't complain or bark anyway." Elliot turned to his father in shock, questioning if he was joking or not. He knew that joking or not, he had to sleep in his room. As his parents kept discussing how Elliot was a wuss, he zoned out. He kept going back in his head to what happened a few nights ago. Chills ran through him, making the hairs on his neck stand up. "She's waiting for me," he said to himself. "What does she want with me?" Then he was brought back to earth by his father's voice. "Go to your quarters now." Elliot knew his father was serious when he used military terms. "Wait, no, please, Pa. I mean, sir," Elliot replied. "It's an order." Mr. Marvin pointed upstairs, implying for him to go to his bed. Mr. Marvin thought it was weird when he had to use hand gestures for Elliot to understand to do something, but when it came to Rover, all that needed to be done was a single say, and Rover did whatever was asked. "Yes, sir." Elliot rushed up the steps, avoiding further punishment. As he got to the top, he waited. He wanted to eavesdrop on his parents' conversation. He wanted them to stop being disappointed in him, only if they knew. "You don't have to treat him like he's a damn troop," said Mrs. Marvin. "The boy has to learn," Mr. Marvin replied. "Learn what? Not to be a girl? Or is it a goddamn child? Louis, he is just a boy. He needs to learn to face crap like that, or he's going to... Going to what? He's going to end up like me before I enlisted. What's wrong with that? I fell in love with that man. He was kind-hearted, considerate, and just like anyone else. I didn't get far being like everyone else. I got pushed around. Scared to take risks, I was a coward. I'll be damned if my boy ends up like that," Mr. Marvin with a shuddering voice. "You think asking for help is cowardly? It most definitely is. That's stupid. Needing help isn't cowardly. Having fear isn't either. Shows you're human. Not today, woman. I don't need your philosophy on what makes someone human. Let's just sleep. It was a good night until Elliot had to ruin it." When Elliot heard his father say this, his initial reaction was that hurt. He then ran to his bedroom before his parents came up the steps. "It's not his fault. Be his father, not his general," Miss Marvin replied. "Well, it's more of a commanding officer." Once he said that, Mrs. Marvin stared him down, wanting him to recognize what he said was idiotic. "Sorry, it just came out. I'll make you sleep on the sofa." No, sorry, honey. "That's right, when we get to the room, I'm commanding officer. You hear?" She winked. "Yes, ma'am," he replied eagerly, like a little boy waiting for it to be time to open Christmas gifts. They head to their room to do the act adults do when they want the feeling of euphoria. Elliot hears them close the door behind them, then thinks, it's time. His father runs to the restroom really fast. To come across Elliot's lights are still on. Boy, don't make me come in there to turn them lights off myself. No, sir, I can do it, Elliot responded. Hop to it then. Yes, sir. Elliot got up from his bed and switched off the lights. He instantly flicked them back just to see his surroundings to make sure he could recognize where everything was. He later turned them off again and sprinted to his bed. He hid under the covers, hoping they can protect him from what lurked in the night. An hour goes by and Elliot couldn't sleep. He continued to shield himself with the blanket. Sweat dripped down his face. He's scared that she's going to come again. A few nights ago, she woke him from his slumber, and he was paralyzed in fear. Her face showed nothing but evil in its purest form. Then suddenly, Elliot heard a clawing noise coming from the corner of the room. Don't look, you don't need to see. Ignore the curiosity. But he just had to look. He needed to know that it wasn't her. He lifted his head from the covers and saw what he could make out to be the demon that haunted his room. He felt deep angst and terror inside him, and she could sense it too. She was shadowy and hard to see because she stayed in the corner where few bits of natural light couldn't hit. She brought up her hand and you could see her claws as she waved at him. Elliot's heart sank to his stomach. He could see her smiling, her teeth sharper than a Gillette razor blade. Slobber rained from her mouth as if she was a loose, raging pit bull. Even Cujo would be put to shame compared to her canines. Her figure resembled a seasonal branch when the leaves began to fall and reveal the twig that was always there like a Houdini trick. Her body acted as if it pretended to be brittle, just to convince its prey to come closer. Her diagram played tricks on the eyes so she can look weak, but when least expected, she overpowers her victim and makes them less of what they are. The evil creature moved towards Elliot with the slightest ambition. She knew there was nothing he could do to stop what's to be done. The slow pace in her steps helped feed the tension. This made him even more frightened. She moved as if she was elderly with hunter intentions. As she got closer, her face became more visible. She had hollow eye sockets, with no trace of any eyes in them. Elliot wondered, how can she see him? Also, why does her face suggest that she was crying? It was probably because she had trails hanging from her bags, which created the illusion she had tears. Her eye sockets looked like caves. It's as if you could use them as a pencil holder. She dragged her long nails against the edge of the bed near Elliot's feet. The demon was provoking discomfort in him. She moved closer each time Elliot blinked. This is why he kept them closed from now on, hoping this would all go away if he didn't open them. He heard her steps getting louder. He felt her presence more near. He felt the vibrations from her nails pulling against the mattress getting ever so close. This continued till he felt her body heat and breath over him. Petrified, he began to urinate on himself, creating a pool of piss under his blanket. The stench was illuminating the room. The demon could smell, and it didn't bother her. She knew that nothing could possibly mess this up. The demon hunched over to get next to Elliot's forehead. When she was near, a tongue that was half a yard came out from her mouth. She then licked his forehead. Elliot couldn't feel his feet or hands. He was in so much shock that his heart beat faster but then stopped every few bumps. He began urinating again. The demon got her razor-sharp nails and pressed them against his eyelids. She put pressure where it was enough to reach his eyeball. She wanted him to watch her. She was going to make him watch if he liked it or not. He screamed in pain, but for some reason it didn't produce any noise. He couldn't even hear his own voice, but he could still hear the creature's pants of enjoyment. She cut his eyelids off on both eyes. He cried bloody tears that streamed down his face. The demon licked the tears off his cheeks, gulping them like they were the last drops of whiskey in a Jack Daniels bottle. He could see her even with his bloody vision. Her face was a gray color. She also had black spots on her face that were all around. It looked like the spots on a cheese pizza. Her face contained wrinkles that looked like ridges on dimes. Her skin felt rough but looked terrible. It was as rough as sycamore bark. She then began to press her nail to the left side of his temple. She continued to dig it deeper. It was like stabbing a warm knife in butter. Blood beaded out. Elliot tried to move, but he couldn't, and he was actually trying to move. He felt like he was under a spell. "It's okay, Elliot, don't fight," the demon whispered. Elliot continued to cry, and it burned him too. The tears ran over his fresh eyelid wounds. The demon gripped his thighs, then pulled a chunk of meat out from his leg. She then proceeded to chew it in front of him. He looked as blood oozed out his leg. The demon glued her gaze on Elliot, loving every bit of pain she unleashed on him. The demon continued to torture him. Every time Elliot was in pain, it fed the demon. That's what it hungered for, the pain and discomfort of her meal. What she had done next was worse than death. She made him stare into her empty sockets, and he could see everything. He saw every bit of wrong and horror that took place on this earth and other earths. He saw torture, murder, rape, and even war. The worst part of it all is he felt everyone's pain, anyone to ever exist and ever to have been in agony. He felt it all. He wanted it to end. For her, it was seconds, but for him, it was like eons. What she made him watch in his head would make the bravest of them all drown in panic. It was something no mortal could process, leaving nothing but horror and despair. Elliot started to give up. He wanted to die now. The demon approached his ear to say one last thing. "I am yours and you are mine. I am yours and you are mine. I am yours and you are mine. I am yours and you are mine, and you are Mithrene," she said like a rhythmic sequence. Hours later, around 7 a.m., Mrs. Marvin went to check on Elliot. She felt bad after last night, and she wanted to tell Elliot that she was going to buy him a light for his room. When she opened his door, she wasn't prepared for what her eyes were about to see. She smelled a stench of urine and insides. She saw a plaster of her son's remains scattered all over the room. Mrs. Marvin let out a loud, uneased scream for her husband to hear. "Ah!" Mr. Marvin came running to his wife's cry, and what he saw dropped him to his knees. Mr. Marvin had felt a pity of guilt cloud over him. Mrs. Marvin wanted to go back and let Elliot stay in her room. Well, as for the demon, it hungers for someone else to feed off of, someone young and pure. The demon could be anywhere. Keep your children safe from what creeps in the gloom, for they may be next, or for they may be already dead. People have a hard time believing in the unknown, making it easier for the darkness to overcome what is seen as worthy and innocent.